Now, Executive Suites with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nisi.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, always glad to have you with us. And today we're talking about one of those interesting, innovative companies doing cutting-edge research in Rhode Island that we're always fascinated to spotlight and try to understand what they're up to in their laboratories and as the scientists do their work. And that company is MindImmune Therapeutics. They're down in South County, and I'm joined today by Stevin Zorn. He's the president and CEO of MindImmune, and Richard Horan. He is the head of the Slater Technology Fund, which has invested in MindImmune. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you for inviting us.
So, Stevin, I'm going to start with you, since you are the chief guy there at MindImmune. The company founded in 2016. Give people the basic thumbnail sketch of what you do at MindImmune.
MindImmune is focused on developing new drug therapies focused on the immune system. So targeting the brain diseases by focusing on a completely innovative idea, and that's neuroinflammation, that we believe underlies a whole host of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and others.
So talk a little more about which diseases we're talking about. Alzheimer's is the big one. You see huge sums of money now being spent to care for folks with Alzheimer's. My grandmother had it. So many families know about the toll of that. That's a big one for you. What are some of the others? So
depression, schizophrenia, Huntington's disease, non-opiate neuropathic pain, coming up with an idea that gets around these horribly addicting and dangerous opiates and coming up with an alternative.
A huge issue right now.
Yes.
Yeah. So you alluded there to the fact that part of what's getting MindImmune some attention and some support, actually, we'll talk about that from Pfizer, is you're looking at a different way to attack these diseases. Walk us through in layman's terms as best you can. What's different about how you and your colleagues are looking at treating these versus maybe what's been studied traditionally?
Okay, that's a really great question. I think, but in order to get into that question, I want to talk about what actually has been done. So I think that the pharmaceutical industry, in thinking about approaches to Alzheimer's disease, has been a bit of a one-trick pony. The industry has focused for 20 years or so on a protein called beta amyloid. Beta amyloid is a major component of plaques that are found in Alzheimer's brain disease tissue.
We've all heard a lot, I think, about when 60 Minutes does it. It's the plaque that attacks.
It's the plaque,
yeah.
And the industry is focused on this, almost singularly.
And it would be the idea of a buildup of the plaque they were thinking might be causing the Alzheimer's.
Right, and we know that beta amyloid is neurotoxic, so the idea was to try to find strategies to eliminate it, to stop its formation, et cetera, et cetera. But so far, the amyloid hypothesis has not yielded any success. No drug therapies that have been tested, that have been brought forward, have yielded any promise.
After enormous amounts of time and money, right?
Enormous amounts of money and time. It's almost like an insanity. You keep doing the same thing over, keep focusing on the same mechanism, and it's not working. So what MindImmune is thinking about is that it's not a one-trick pony that underlies central nervous system disease. The brain is very, very complicated. And there are areas that have largely been ignored, kind of a missing link. And that includes neuroinflammation, vascular biology, together with neuroscience. And we know that in thinking about Alzheimer's disease, you need all three of those systems working in exquisite interaction in order to keep the brain running smoothly and in order to keep the diseases in check. And when that goes wrong, you get disease. So MindImmune is focused on neuroinflammation, which is at that interface among those three different areas. We've been working on this as individuals within the company for close to 20 years and thinking about this. And in order to do that, immunology is a very complicated field. Neuroscience is a very, very complicated field. Getting immunologists, inflammation specialists, and neuroscientists together to actually work this has been very complicated. And it's been complicated to study these three areas together because it's very complicated to study each one individually.
Let alone when you combine them.
Let alone when you're combining. So I think it's that myopic view of studying each of these areas alone that has led to our lack of progress progress in the area where understanding how they interface and how they integrate is so important.
So what's kind of the theory underlying the hypothesis of what might be going on in people's brains? You mentioned their neuroinflammation. If you could, again, I always admit I wasn't a great science student. What you guys think might be going on in people's brains that's leading to some of these troubling diseases?
So we think that neuroinflammation is the missing link. So attacking the immune system, we think is going to revolutionize treatment of Alzheimer's and treatment of other types of neurodegenerative diseases. Maybe I could just kind of paint a picture, paint a story. So neuroinflammation, we have discovered, we didn't personally discover it, but in our research we understand that almost every CNS-related disease,
that's central nervous system
disease, mental illness, both on the psychiatry and the neurology sides, have an underlying component of neuroinflammation associated with the disease. We've also learned from recent genetics findings and a whole wealth of data from biology, science, etc., all comes together to suggest very strongly that neuroimmunology, neuroinflammation is causative of at least Alzheimer's disease and many of these others. So the idea is that if you can intervene in that causation, you can stop the disease in a disease-modifying way. So the picture I want to paint is that when the immune system is designed to protect us, when a foreign substance like a protein, a virus, some kind of particle gets into the brain, the immune system is there to clean up, to protect, and defend, and to repair. And the problem is that it does such a good job of that that sometimes the immune system overshoots. It gets out of whack. And
it's almost overactive?
No, it doesn't become overactive, but it can make a bad situation worse.
Oh, okay.
So let me give you an example. So let's say you had a fire, a little fire in your house. You call the fire department. They come over with a fire hose and they shoot water, put out the fire, but at the end, they basically destroyed the property with so much water that it's unsalvageable. So too, neuroinflammation can come in, try to clean up and destroy the mess, but in the process, destroy cells all around the mess. So that's one way where it can exacerbate disease. It's also another way where if you think about inflammation in the brain, you can think about like heat, fire. There's a smoldering bed of neuroinflammation underlying these diseases that if you don't do something about that underlying neuroinflammation, you're probably not going to be able to affect the disease. So another example of that might be, let's say you have a broken washing machine in a burning room. What do you do first? Do you fix the washing machine, call a repairman, or do you call the fire department to put out the fire? Of course you put out the fire, because if you can put out the fire, then you can repair the washing machine after. If you repair the washing machine, it doesn't matter because the fire is going to destroy the room. That's what neuroinflammation is like.
Fascinating. Okay, I want to bring Rich Horan in before we go to a break from Slater Fund. So to remind people, Slater Fund, you're set up, I think, in the Lincoln Allman days, right?
Yep.
The state. And
dating back to the late 90s.
And you invest in early stage companies that show some promise. What was appealing about MindImmune?
Well, first and foremost, it's the market opportunity that MindImmune is targeting, a major unmet need in clinical medicine. Secondly, it's the team comprising the four founders who brought decades of background and experience to bear in this particular area of drug discovery research. Third, it was the commitment on the part of the founders to base their bill and build their business here in Rhode Island, which was important to us, as that's an integral part of our mandate at Slater. When the company launched, it was launched at the University of Rhode Island, located in the College of Pharmacy in collaboration with the Ryan Institute for Neuroscience at URI. And so the combination of that, the market opportunity, the strong team, and the commitment to base and build their drug discovery business here in Rhode Island is what really formed the basis for our interest in the company.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about what's going on at MindImmune, a major partnership you guys have just announced, and some other topics in the innovation economy in Rhode Island. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and we are talking today about a new company doing innovative, cutting-edge research, somewhat new, founded in 2016 down in South County, MindImmune Therapeutics. And I'm joined by their CEO, Stevin Zorn, as well as Richard Horan. He's head of the Slater Technology Fund, which is a publicly chartered investment fund that has invested in and is supporting MindImmune. I want to go back to Slater. We were talking a little about Slater's role in this and why it was appealing to you. How much has MindImmune invested? Has Slater invested so far in MindImmune?
Well, we seeded the company in 2016 with a commitment of $500,000, which is not a typical level of seed capital investment to launch a new venture. We then followed on with an incremental investment of $250,000 for Slater's part, and we're joined by private investors in a comparable amount. So there's been $1 million of seed capital put into the company. More recently, the company has entered into a agreement with Pfizer, who has committed additional capital as part of the early equity investment in the company.
And Stevin, what was the importance of Slater's investment? How big of a deal did it make for you guys?
It enabled the company to exist.
Yeah, okay. And then the Pfizer thing I really want to talk about because I think it's interesting. You just announced, began in 2018. As I understand it, it's both a research agreement and some investment, as Richard said. Why is that a big deal for you? You're actually Pfizer alums, we should say, the leaders of the company.
Yeah, all four of the founders at some point came from Pfizer. I was there for 20 years.
And what will the Pfizer investment and role do for you guys?
So one of the approaches that we're taking is to think about immune cells, a novel immune cell, and how it has an effect on the brain. And these novel immune cells are not in the brain. And so we've discovered this cell, and we believe that it has a role to play in Alzheimer's disease, and Pfizer was interested in understanding that as well. And so that's the basis for our collaboration, is to understand how these immune cells can affect the diseases in the brain, particularly Alzheimer's disease, and how we can work together in order to enable new potential therapies that haven't been approachable before.
It was intriguing, I think, to those of us who saw the announcement, because Pfizer had just recently announced it was pulling back its internal research efforts on Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Is this a sign that the big drug companies, you think, are still interested in this, even if they aren't sure where they should be going with their own research? How does it all fit together?
So the big drug companies are very interested in neuroscience. I mean, in neuroscience-related diseases, because of the tremendous unmet medical need and the commercial opportunity. The problem is that they haven't had tremendous success in recent years, and so Pfizer's not the first company to pull out of neuroscience research. They're at the end of a fairly long line of companies that have pulled out. But I think that creates a tremendous opportunity. There's a lot of people suffering from these, scourges of society, some of these most awful diseases. My mother-in-law died of Alzheimer's disease. I'm sure most families know people and the suffering that it creates. Pfizer would very much be interested in participating in drug discovery, and that's where the biotech community comes in now. So a new paradigm of drug discovery. So I think the pharmaceutical industry needs new targets, and the biotech community on a smaller platform can pursue novel targets like we are in a very small environment, and with us, with the University of Rhode Island, doing some type of innovative collaboration work with experts in the field so that we can move these approaches quickly, validate them, and bring them to the place where they become drug discovery targets that can then be pursued by big pharma.
Almost reminds me a little of the independent record labels and how they'll start a band up and then eventually they get big and they move on to Capitol Records or something like that.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Really great analogy.
In fact, the relationships between the founders of MindImmune and their colleagues at Pfizer was central to the genesis of that alliance. It was in the proximity between where MindImmune is located at the University of Rhode Island in South Kingstown, and Pfizer, specifically in their Groton labs, was an important factor as well.
Yeah, because Pfizer, their research, it's right over the border, right from Rhode Island and Groton.
Right.
That's where they have a big
short drive between South Kingstown and Groton. And the Groton labs are probably some of the most productive research labs in the Pfizer worldwide research network. in some respects, it was a good news, bad news story, but with a silver lining. The good news is we closed on our deal with Pfizer. The bad news was simultaneously, as you know and alluded to, Pfizer elected to close down their internal research programs. But the silver lining is a function of an important message that Pfizer came out with, which was their intent to stay involved in the field by way of a CNS-focused venture capital strategy. And while I think the announcement caught many by surprise, both internal to Pfizer as well as in some measure to us, it's become clear as we have commenced the collaboration that Pfizer is committed to MindImmune and its relationship. And in fact, I think it's fair to say that MindImmune is a bit of a poster child for the strategy that Pfizer is going to be implementing in the neuroscience space going forward. And so we're optimistic. It's early days, but we're quite optimistic about the possibilities of that relationship expanding.
We're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about your collaboration with URI at MindImmune and your presence there on the campus in that beautiful new pharmacy building they just built in recent years. So stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. We are talking today to Stevin Zorn. He is the president and CEO of MindImmune Therapeutics, a company down in South County doing cutting-edge research on brain diseases like Alzheimer's and a new way potentially to treat those. And he's joined by Richard Horan, head of the Slater Technology Fund, which is an investor in MindImmune. As I said, South County, we've alluded to it a couple times. You guys are actually headquartered down at URI at the Ryan Institute for Neuroscience, named, I believe, for Tom Ryan, the former CVS CEO who has the scratch to help out with innovations like that. Talk a little bit about URI's role, because I think it was fairly unique for URI to put a for-profit company on campus using some of their facilities. How does it all fit together, and why did it work for MindImmune?
So, I mean, to go back one step, why did we even think about coming to Rhode Island? So in thinking about Rhode Island, so neuroscience has been growing in leaps and bounds in Rhode Island, and that's not something that I think everybody knows. The state has made tremendous investment in infrastructure relating to neuroscience, engineering, chemistry, pharmacy, and other areas. And Rhode Island is uniquely situated in this biotech corridor right in between Boston and New York. So to be here and growing a neuroscience company right along with a state that's growing its neuroscience resources sounded like a wonderful place to be.
And so, you know, people look up the road and they see all the stuff happening in Cambridge, and it seems like such a hotbed of this kind of research. You don't feel the pull that, like, well, maybe we should be up there with everybody else?
Not at all, because we can get on a train and be there within 45 minutes to an hour, and we do that all the time. And we also have colleagues in New York, we do that all the time. And with all that investment in technology, the resources at the University of Rhode Island, particularly in the pharmacy school and in the Ryan Institute, are fantastic. They meet our needs. They do everything that we would want them to do for us. And by being affiliated with the Ryan Institute, we've become Ryan Research Professors. We're teaching a class. And that affords us an opportunity to gain access to resources that we might not otherwise have. Students, postdocs, federal grant money, a laboratory, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's almost like a drug hunter's dream to be able to come here, work at the University of Rhode Island, have the Ryan Institute right there to collaborate with. There are terrific scientists to build relationships. And we put together an innovative collaboration agreement and an intellectual property agreement that enabled us to work together in concert with our academic colleagues. And you referred to that. In fact, that's the first agreement of its kind that's been made in Rhode Island between a private drug discovery firm and the university and the Ryan Institute. And so we see that as blazing a trail towards new innovative startup companies coming into this environment and bringing their ideas into this sector of biotech hub.
I've never heard the phrase drug hunter before. I like that's it sounds like an action movie. I like that. Richard,
I think it refers to a mindset.
Yeah.
That there's a certain competency that comes from having discovered medicines and coming up with an idea that you can then translate into something that becomes what we call druggable, and taking it all the way to patients and then to the marketplace. And that's a competency that we bring as a core competency to the Ryan Institute, along with our neuroinflammation background. And I think that since we created the world's first neuroinflammation discovery unit in the pharmaceutical area at Lundbeck, we feel very well positioned to help the Ryan in one of those three pillars, the neuroinflammation area, to achieve their goal of coming up with a cure and treatment for Alzheimer's disease, but also to be able to be successful in our quest of bringing forward an immunological treatment that we can use to affect these disorders.
Richard, you've been at Slater, I think, about a decade and a half now, and so you've had a close-up view of the innovation economy in Rhode Island. I'm curious what you think and what developments you've noticed over that time, and how you think the health of kind of, all we hear from state leaders is a desire to have, 100 MindImmunes doing this kind of research, leading to these kind of innovations. What do you? How does it look out there to you as you survey the landscape?
Well, I think we're progressing in building the innovation economy. The innovation economy, particularly in life sciences and biomed, is a rather unique animal. It's evolved here in the United States without peer worldwide. It tends to operate at this interface between academic research and the world of commercial startups. And much of the academic research is fueled by federal funding in the form of NIH grants and grants for the National Science Foundation and whatnot. It becomes the basis for innovations that the universities often then patent. And then the key is transferring those technologies into a commercial venture and attracting teams of scientists like those who comprise the MindImmune team to take those innovations and attract the resources, be it the talent or the capital, to take the venture to scale. Eventually, as you move those innovations into laboratory experimentation and development, you need to raise considerable amounts of money, most often from institutional venture capital firms, and ultimately by way of partnerships with major pharma companies. And it's a model that we have actually invested in on numerous occasions through the Slater Fund. In fact, this is the third time we have backed a team of Pfizer drug discovery scientists who came out of the Groton Research Labs. The first of those companies did not succeed. The second of those companies, Nemesen Pharmaceuticals, succeeded rather well, attracted some $20 million worth of venture capital financing. They partnered their lead program with Novartis in the depression field. They relocated to Cambridge as the venture investors and the management team were primarily Boston-based. But the silver lining that emerged from the experience with Nemesen, now Cadent Therapeutics, was one of the founding scientists of Nemesen, Frank Minetti, elected not to relocate to Cambridge and rather formed the founding team at MindImmune. And so Frank Minetti introduced us to Bob Nelson and to Stevin, Zorn, and to Brian Campbell, and the four of them comprised the founding team at MindImmune. And this time around, we've located the company at the University of Rhode Island in collaboration with the Ryan Institute, in hopes that we can germinate the roots more firmly here in the early stages of development. And so far, it's playing out pretty much according to script.
So, Stevin, your desk will be padlocked down there in Kingston.
Can I just add something?
We have 10 seconds. Go
10
quick.
seconds. Yeah, the four founders have over 100 years of experience in pharmaceutical research discovery, and we've put drugs on the market. So, we feel very capable in leading the charge in MindImmune to take forward, together with the Ryan and our colleagues there, to bring innovative pharmaceuticals for the future of brain research.
All right, that's all the time we have. See you back here next week on Executive Suite.